All right, folks, it's time for another edition of the Online Dinner Party. We're going to have some guests pop in, including one that has written a book about charisma and all along those lines, as well as a possible guest that will be talking about their movie and all along those lines. The big news here in Durham, North Carolina is snow. That's right. I think in some parts of North Carolina, we've got like around 6 or 7 inches. And I know that one of the founders of the network was predicted that we would get about 10 inches. And I think we've got maybe like 3 to 5 and all in that space on the outside right now. So it was a small snowstorm a couple of weeks ago, and now we're having another one, and it feels like it hit a lot of the nation and a lot of the world, particularly here in the United States and all along those lines. So it ought to be fascinating. I know that as a kid, there were times that you might go out and try to do those like whole airplane kind of things, snow bunnies, I think they were called, and all along those lines. And of course, I do remember as a kid trying to go out and get snow cream made, which is ice cream made out of the fallen snow. Some people say that with all the chemicals that are in the snow, that it probably wasn't good for us. But as a kid, you really didn't care because you were just enjoying the flavor, and it was like an ice cream and all in that space. And I know the last snowstorm that we had, which like I said, was probably about a month and a half ago, there were some kids that took their clothes basket, and there is a small hill here in my apartment complex, and they were going down that in their clothes basket. So they made their own sled and everything like that. And I'd heard the local news talking about that the last snowstorm, they ran out of sleds, so they had to order some more. So hopefully kids have got sleds that they can go down some of these small hills and all along those lines, because it's 4 o'clock, so they might be doing that once the snow starts tapering off and all in that kind of way. So it ought to be fascinating to see how people handle the snow. Some people might be trying to get some hearty food, maybe some soup. I know that I'm a fan of chicken noodle and minestrone and things like that. So there might be some people that are trying to get that kind of flavor and all along those lines, the flavor of the season, I should say, and in that space. I was actually talking to one of my coworkers, and she was going to go feed the birds, because we know that sometimes the birds are not ready for this kind of weather, and a lot of the animals are not ready for this kind of weather. I know that here in this part of North Carolina, in the triangle, as we call it, we've got rabbits, we've got deers, and some of them are probably not prepared for the winter onslaught and all along those lines. But hey, it is still winter. We are in the middle of February. And of course, there is that whole notion of Valentine's Day. As a matter of fact, the Cultural Arts Center that I work at, they did 2 Valentine's Day shows. There were also a salute to Luther Vandross and all along those lines. So Franklin did that. He was the Sandman on our Road to the Apollo show, and he did a great job in that regards and in that space and all along those lines. So it ought to be interesting to see what goes on in that space, and maybe we'll hear from him and later on, because I might reach out to him and see what he's got going on in his mind, and if he wants to pop on the show to talk about that show that featured even some musicians from the whole New York area, because I know there was a violinist that was from New York, and I think one of the vocalists was from New York as well. But they were definitely honoring Luther Vandross with just honoring the Valentine's Day theme. I think they ordered like about 100 roses or something like that. I never saw those roses handed out, so I don't know what they did with those roses or if they made use of those roses, but hopefully they did, since it is a Valentine's Day, or was last weekend, and all along those lines. But I know I've got 2 guests. I might have a third one joining us that is written a documentary about the whole Flair bartending scene, and I'm waiting to hear if they're going to show up as well. They were scheduled, and we did have 2 of their people that have been on past shows as well. So we're going to see if Deborah Richards, who has been a past guest on this show, gets a chance to appear as well. But, one of the things that a lot of people are fascinated by is this notion of magnetic allure. I just said that it was Valentine's Day, and a lot of folks are wondering about that and how that plays out and all along those lines. And some people say that certain folks have charisma and they know how to hustle and all along those lines. So I'm going to see if I can't bring in Malia Rogers. I know she's having some problem with her camera, but you'll still be able to hear her voice and what she's all about and all along those lines. But she is definitely did a whole book about this whole notion of charisma and all along that kind of space. So, Malia, glad that you were able to join us and everything. Like I said, this is actually the backdrop in the picture that you're seeing there of Durham, North Carolina. So that's actually a overhead view, and I think you might even be able to see some of the ballpark, the newer ballpark, and probably even in the background some of the campus of Duke University, and all along those lines. But definitely, it is a beautiful city, and a city that a lot of people love and admire, particularly those of us that are here and all along those lines. But I was just wondering your take on this notion of charisma. I know a lot of people are wondering about charisma and have thoughts around charisma, but you have written a book about it and all along those lines. And, we've even got a leader of the world that some people say has a lot of charisma. Some people don't like him. Some people do like him, but they do talk about his charisma, that being the current leader of the United States. But I was just wondering, what made you decide to write a book about charisma?
Hi, Mark. Well, thank you for having me join you. And what a beautiful town you live in. Thank you for sharing that. So, thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
No problem at all. Glad to have you. Glad to learn more about this book that you've written around the allure of charisma. So, do we all have some element of charisma? Because I know even on this network, I have talked about this notion of the imposter syndrome. It's come up on several of our shows. And I know that in my own business life, as well as my own relationship life, I have talked myself out of situations because I did not have the confidence that we probably should have. And maybe I didn't have enough confidence in my own charisma and everything. So, what made you decide to write a book about charisma?
Yeah, so basically, thanks for asking. The number one question people ask me is because I'm an entrepreneur and I was able to quickly build my book of business to a national presence. And so people are always asking me how I was able to do it all through word of mouth. And so what I decided to do was put together a blueprint and teach other entrepreneurs how to build a network of referral partners, other professionals that would send you business. So I started teaching this to hundreds of people out there. And then I realized, you know what? It works for some, but it didn't work for others. So I started thinking about what is the missing piece to the puzzle to why people will send business to one person, but not someone else. And the aha moment was we could do all the steps, but if people don't like us, they're just simply not going to send business to us. And so I started studying the science behind charisma and what makes someone magnetic.
Hmm. That's interesting, everything, because I know, like I said, there are some people that are considered to be naturally charismatic, and there are some even in the political realm that are having that kind of charm. I mean, some people would say that, and I would argue that they're probably right, that both in some way Barack Obama and the current president have that natural charisma, and sometimes it can be good for them, sometimes it can be bad for them. So, how important is it for us to recognize our own charisma?
That is a great question. So the encouraging thing, I did like 2 years worth of research on this, and I found it encouraging that charisma is something that can be developed over time. So some of these people, the influencers that you, in fact, that you mentioned out there, were probably once unpolished. And so the formula with charisma, I found that was easy to explain was Vanessa Van Edwards. She came up with this formula, and charisma is the perfect balance between someone who's competent and warm. And and usually if you're missing charisma, then it's an imbalance of one or the other. So for example, if you are super competent but you're not warm, people are going to find you intimidating or they're going to think you're a jerk, right? But if you're super warm but they don't view you as competent, then they're not going to take you seriously. And so you want a balance of both. And so the first step to figuring out your own charisma is doing like an inventory. So what I recommend is Googling characteristics of a warm person and then Googling characteristics of someone who is competent and then do a checklist. You know, do people often describe you as helpful, team builder, smart, trustworthy? And then you can figure out if you need to work on being more warm or if you need to work on being more appearing more competent. Mark, I think you're muted.
That was not going to be good and everything. But I was going to say before I bring in some of the other guests and all along those lines and everything like that, I was curious because I kind of alluded to it and had Deborah on before, and I'm getting ready to bring her on shortly. She's written a movie about flair bartending and has been involved in the Hollywood industry for a number of years and all along those lines. But there's this notion of the fear of rejection. I know that, like I said, whether it has been job opportunities or relationship opportunities, I have probably not pursued some of those situations for exactly that reason, the fear of rejection and the fear of not being competent enough or being confident enough, I should say, as well. So what do you say in your book to try to get people past that very common fear? Because I think it is a common fear that's probably prevalent in our society.
Yes, I agree with you, Mark. That fear is one of the number one things that hold people back. And like you said, not only professional, but personal level as well. And so we're humans are really funny creatures because we're the only species that actually make up stuff in our head that hasn't happened yet. And then we get really worried and then it like holds us back. And so I think it's a self-imposed ceiling, but the main reason we don't want to feel rejected is, well, we fear rejection, and so that's why our brain tells us not to do something, right? So oftentimes it stops us and prevents us from pursuing our dreams, our goals, or reaching out to that person you really wanted to reach out to. And so I do have several different ways to mitigate that. But one of my favorites is something that Mel Robbins that she recommends. It's called the 5-second rule. Have you heard of that before?
I think I've heard of different 5 second rules. Like, of course, there's that infamous 5 second rule about if food drops on the table, don't pick that up within 5 seconds or don't eat it, and all along those lines. So, heard that 5 second rule, and there are other 5 second rules as well.
Yes. Okay. That's funny that you mentioned that because that is true. Okay. So basically, Mel Robbins, she's now a motivational speaker, but there was a time in her life when she was struggling with depression and she found it really difficult to get out of bed. And so one evening, she saw this commercial featuring a rocket, and by counting down, and she came up with that idea by seeing that rocket. So the next morning she decided that instead of hitting the snooze button and going back to bed, she decided to count backwards: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then launch herself out of bed like a rocket. So what happens is when you think of an idea, you want to start making movement right away. You think of a really awesome idea, you count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you start making the motion, because what it does is it interrupts the part of your brain that wants to protect you. The part of your brain that says, I don't want to get hurt. That's a horrible idea. Let's not do it. And so if you're at a party and you see someone you want to talk to, then you need to just count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then start walking towards that person to interrupt that brain pattern. And so once you start forcing yourself to do those things using the 5-second rule, then it builds positive reinforcement that, hey, I wanted to go talk to that person. I was afraid to talk to that person. I did it anyways, and I didn't die.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I said, I'm gonna bring in Deborah, and she is definitely a woman that I've had the pleasure of interviewing a couple of times, and I would definitely say that she is a person of charisma, and she definitely is not afraid to tackle the rough side of Hollywood because she definitely talked about some of the bad things that went on in her own Hollywood career and all along those lines, but she's now got a film out about the whole notion of flair bartending. And we've had a couple of the flair bartenders on this show and all along those lines. But I'm thinking that she might have even had some time where she was fearing rejection and creating what some people would call a specialty movie, because the last movie that I saw about flair bartending was the old movie that Tom Cruise was in called Cocktails and all along those lines. So I was going to bring in Deborah and see her thoughts around this whole notion of this movie that she's put together and all along those lines, and just this thought about the importance of charisma, because I'm thinking that you have been in Hollywood for a number of years, and I know that just from having interviewed you in the past and everything like that. So what is your take on the importance of charisma to Hollywood? Because we've even seen a lot of Hollywood, both past and present stars that are still being very charismatic. I would be lying if I said that I probably won't be watching later on tonight Hollywood Squares, because it's fun watching some of those old actors that are still out there and all along those lines. And I think that airs on Wednesday night. So I don't know if they've reached out to you yet, Deborah, but they should, because they've got those other folks, so they need to reach out to you as well. But what is your take on charisma, and how much did you have to dig into your charisma toolbox in order to get this movie made, which will be premiering very shortly? You're on mute. You're on mute, Deborah.
Gosh, oh my gosh, sorry. I was just saying hi, Mark, and hi, is it Malia or Malia?
Malia.
Malia, pleasure to meet you, and it's great to see you again, Mark. It's always a pleasure to be here, so thank you so much for having me. And on the topic of charisma, wow, it's interesting, because as a director, you have to talk to different people that you're working with different love languages. And so I think charisma comes a lot into play with that, with the interpersonal relationships that you have with your cast and your crew. And, it's always hard trying to figure out whether someone's going to respond to the carrot or the stick. And, or, like different people respond to things in different ways. And I think charisma goes a long way to really expedite communication and get your ideas across. Because if I was saying everything at one level and monotone and didn't have any kind of charisma, maybe my word wouldn't be heard. So I think it's, charisma is an important ingredient of being a film director. But, there's so many ingredients that go into that salad. But also talking about confidence, because you were mentioning about, confidence. It's strange because, again, my lens of the world is through a director's, paradigm. And it's tough, man. Confidence is tough because, when you make a movie, it takes so many years, and you have to keep that motivation level up, and you have to keep that confidence up. And it's not all red carpets and unicorns every day, right? There's lots of rejection and failures and pivots and things that you have to adjust to that just, it's part of filmmaking. So it can really chip away at your confidence. And I recently started my own YouTube channel, and it's difficult because it's kind of like a day-to-day life of my life as a film director. And it's very difficult for me to be confident on camera. And it's not so much me being confident on camera. It's like I don't like watching myself back. So lately I've had this whole crisis of trying to draw up confidence to be on camera, to show an audience what the behind the scenes of movie making. But that's my take on charisma and confidence. Right?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And this is for both of you. And then we'll bring in Lincoln Solar as well very shortly. We might have another guest will come up shortly also, and I'll see if they show up. I think they were going to show up closer to 4:30 or 4:45 and everything. But I was just wondering, because I've always heard this notion that a lot of us are, particularly in the entertainment world, are introvert extrovert. So we actually have the quality of both of those and everything like that. So I just wondered to both of you your take on that and everything like that, because I'm definitely thinking that a lot of us are probably not wanting to be put in one box or the other, and we probably have qualities of both and everything. And I do know that that's very common in the entertainment space. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around that, Malia, but also yours as well, Deborah.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. There's definitely strengths and for each, right, introverts and extroverts. And it just reminds me, what Deborah was saying reminds me of that quote by Maya Angelou.
Mhm.
People may not remember what you do, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. So I think that communication is really important, regardless of if you're an introvert or an extrovert. And just studying human psychology just really is fascinating for that reason.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's your take on that, Deborah? And then there's another question I've got for both of you. And then, like I said, I'm going to bring in Lincoln as well. But I know a number of my friends in the entertainment field, they also run into another dilemma that I'll explain in a second and everything. But what's your take on this notion of, do you consider yourself, Deborah, more of an introvert or an extrovert? Or do you think of, like myself, that you have a mixture of both of those?
It's really strange because I'm very, very, very much an introvert. I'm literally almost a recluse. I hardly ever go out because I have a studio at home and I work at home, and so I'm very, very, very much on the introvert scale. However, for some reason, because I have a modicum of charisma, people misinterpret that as me being an extrovert. And I would almost argue that my art is the extrovert part of my personality, because we all have a little bit of introvert and a little bit of extrovert, right?
Yeah.
And so me as an artist, I'm an introvert, but my art is my extrovert side of me. So
Love
when
that.
people see a film that I made, they are interfacing with that extrovert part of me. And so I don't want to then have to, engage, because I feel like my art already has. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot
Mhm.
of sense and everything. Hey, Malia, along those same lines, one of the things that I know you probably noticed even in your book, and like I said, I'm gonna bring in Lincoln to hear some of this conversation as well, and everything is this notion of a lot of entertainers, unfortunately, can't just depend on their art to make a living. I've got a number of friends that are everything from visual artists to funk musicians to jazz musicians and a number of others, and I'd be lying if I said that quite a few of them aren't driving Uber and driving Lyft or driving for DoorDash or some of the other services, because unfortunately it can be a difficult road in order to make a living in the arts and all along those lines. So what is your take on this notion of a lot of our business leaders and entrepreneurs finding themselves having to do a side gig?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's not just in the entertainment world. I think that with the cost of living increasing, more and more people are having to do side gigs. And so basically, a side gig, you want to think of it as kind of like a bonus level in your life, like something that you do to earn extra money. Explore your passions or build skills that's apart from your full-time job. Now, some people end up making side money from it, and some people end up making enough money to quit their day job. And so I think that's becoming the norm now.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's your take on that, Deborah? And along those same lines, I've heard a lot of people, including some of my friends in the arts, including one that used to live in California that now lives in Florida with his new lady love and everything, that they talked about this notion of the tribe. And a lot of people are trying to find their tribe and everything like
Mhm.
that. I know even with this Flair movie, it seems like you found some members of your tribe, because I did meet two of the Flair bartenders, and they seem like they have become a part of your tribe and all along those lines. So how important is it for people to find their tribe, and what does a tribe mean to you?
Oh, look, we are genetically encoded from dinosaur days, right? To find tribes, because and this is why branding, funnily enough, is so powerful, because we're genetically encoded to respond to these triggers. I mean, back in caveman days, if you weren't in a tribe, you couldn't protect the women, you couldn't protect your food, and you couldn't hunt together. So
Mhm.
it's like literally genetically encoded within us to tribe together. And I've always said that, I'm a big advocate of education. I'm a former film school brat. And so I've always said that your film school buddies of today are your crew of tomorrow. Now, I've been very, very blessed that with each movie you make, it's very intense experience. And so the part of the movie where there's the most people involved is actually during production when you're filming, and it's very intense and it's very short usually on narrative work. With the documentary, it's a little bit longer and different shape, but still the same kind of thing applies, that these people become your film family. And I'm so proud and I'm so excited of my film family in this latest film that I've made, Shaken and Stirred. I'm repping the swag because it's now available for pre-order at flairdocumentary.com. But yeah, finding your tribe is everything. Loneliness is the biggest killer, I think, right?
Oh, I agree. Yeah, definitely. We, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the sense of belonging is one of the top needs after food and safety and shelter.
You're taking me back to Psychology 101.
Yeah.
Speaking of that and everything, Lincoln, share a little bit about your background and what you've got going on. Because like I said, I know that I had invited you to come in as well, and you've got a interesting background also. So share a little bit about what's going on in your world, because I know that you have also talked about being a variety of businesses, because I know that you've been everything from a mountaineer to a physicist to a computer software entrepreneur to a hypnotherapist and a psychotherapist. So you've definitely done a lot of work with people from different parts of the spectrum. And we oftentimes hear people talk about the spectrum as well. So how did you get into these multitude of careers? We talk about careers, and it sounds like you've been one that wanted to explore a lot of different things, kind of like Deborah does as well. But what made you get into this notion of having these different aspects of you?
Well, I think I'll winnow that down to the one question that everyone's been talking about, which was feeling belonging and charisma. I mean, forget about my history. It's all over the place. So as a therapist, I have an interesting contrary position in that my business is try to become out of business, is to stop needing to consult with people, because that means they're finished. And that means they're whatever. I'm finished. I've done my work. So I do develop, they do say charisma and, relationship is the most important thing in therapy. And it is. But when I get relationship, I usually abuse it. Of course, I don't think it's abuse, but that's my job. I'm here to take people out of their comfort zone. So if they thought I was a nice guy to begin with, my job is to disabuse them of that notion. And so it's an interesting thing, talk about celebrity and popularity and charisma. Well, I basically try to make myself unnecessary. And if that means unwanted, that often means unwanted, because people can't really take responsibility for someone else's indiscretions. So, when I find people who have an issue, and people's issues, this is a thing I'm thinking about these days, have often to do with boundaries, clear boundaries, identity, necessity, value. And how do you talk to somebody about a boundary they can't see? And my answer is that you make it more visible, usually by inflaming it, poking at it, or, wearing some devil suit and getting them agitated and motivated and maybe active. So like typical, and you could probably relate to your own life. You don't know what to do in a situation. You don't know what to do. You don't know who the problem is. You've got a lot of blame to put on other people. You can't really see your own faults, because if you did, you wouldn't have them anymore. You would have changed them. So my role is to come in and annoy you. And some people are very sensitive to that, and it gets them motivated. And other people find it a challenge. And they rise to it and they say, I can take that and work with it. So that's my I call it a quick answer to some of these issues that you brought up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. But, in the United States, it's one of the big issues that we've been hearing with our kids and everything. And I don't have any kids of my own, but I do have two nephews, is this notion of mental health. As a matter of fact, one of our more popular shows here on the network is this notion of bullying. And Stephanie Hockenhall and her son, Gene, do a show that talks about what they call the epidemic of bullying, and this kind of like notion of the narcissist and the gaslighter and a number of other things that they've been exploring. As a matter of fact, they've had a wrapping up a whole series just on the gaslighters and all along those lines. So how, and this is for everybody, much of a problem do you think it is, this alleged or supposed mental health crisis that we have in the country and everything like that? So I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts about this, because I've heard a lot of people that are concerned that we are in a mental health dilemma.
I can share a little bit about that. As a health insurance broker, I speak to people nationwide about health insurance, and a big concern is mental health. And there is definitely a shortage of providers. So I have clients who are also therapists, and they're getting burnt out too. And I do believe that it all boils down to what Deborah was saying about the sense of needing to be belong, like the sense of connection is gone. And I think with the increase of electronics and people being on their phone all the time, I think we're missing that. So that probably feeds into a lot of anxiety and depression. Of course, I'm not a psychologist, but that is just from my point of view as an insurance broker.
That makes a lot of sense. What's your take on that, Lincoln, and everything? And I'd love to hear Deborah's as well.
I don't have an opinion yet, so let's hear Deborah, and then maybe I will.
Well, first of all, Lincoln, I got a quick joke for you. How many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? One, but the light bulb has to want to change. So I'm sure you've heard that before as a therapist. I probably butchered it, so I apologize.
Well, okay, you won't joke up on me. I'll have to find one, put one in. I'll think about it.
That was good.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. But getting back to the point of mental health in America or the world today, right? Yeah, people are struggling, man. People are struggling across the world. I have friends all across the world that I speak to often, and people are struggling. I think the average American doesn't have more than $500 in savings. I believe that most Americans earn, spend the whole month making all the money just to pay rent and bills and have nothing left over for the next month. And that has got to weigh you down. I struggle from mental health issues. Like I was saying earlier, keeping motivation over long periods of time, because films take 3-4 years to make, and as the leader of a team, it's up to me to keep up that level of motivation, and that is difficult because I'm subject to the whims of the world, same as anyone else. I have good days and bad days, and sometimes I'm in a fetal position in the shower crying like a baby, and sometimes I'm leading the charge. So mental health is a real issue today for the world. What's the answer? Get out, touch earth, more human connections, more, get off the phone. It was funny, someone to me was trying to make a point, and they told me, read a phone. And I was like, oh my gosh, you mean read a book, right? Like that's where we're at in society.
Wow.
So we need to disconnect from technology and reconnect with each other to really protect our mental health, I believe. But it's easier said than done, right? I mean, I'm a victim as well as a preacher on the subject. So
that makes a lot of sense and everything. But even you kind of alluded to it, Lincoln, and everything earlier. But I hear people all the time talking about, even in club environments and relationship environments, this notion of boundaries and all along those lines. And I've had some friends that have been in the spectrum, and I know that sometimes they have a hard time dealing with the concept of boundaries and all along those lines. So how can we address this notion of boundaries? Because I know that there are even times that, and I hate to say it because we got 2 women on the show and everything, that sometimes women feel that they are having people that are getting maybe a little bit too close and a little bit too comfortable because they don't respect the boundaries and all along those lines. And there might not even be always wanting the attention that sometimes the man and others may be giving them and everything. So it seems like even though we say that we understand boundaries, that I don't know that we thoroughly understand the notion of boundaries. So I just wanted your take on that. Anybody wants to answer, but Lincoln, if you want to take it, or anybody, because I sometimes wonder that do we just give boundaries lip service?
I think we have to. I really don't have a good answer to that, but I've been talking to my clients about boundaries, and I get a lot of feedback And what what I heard today was that you have to be clear with your boundaries. And what I would like to add is, and this is kind of ridiculous, but I think it's important. You have to imagine what should be on the other side of the boundary.
Mhm.
In other words, you have to imagine, it's not like law of attraction that you automatically get what you imagine. But if you don't relate to the world in a way you think is positive, you're not going to foster that positive vibe. So I think it's important not just to have boundaries, but to imagine what you want the other boundaries to be. I mean, obviously, you can't change somebody else, but you can invite somebody else to change by saying, hey, this is where I'm at, and this is what I'll respond to, and this is what I won't respond to. And you can either join me in some event or I will not be available. So I think there's a certain courage to this, right? Because you're saying, this is where I'm going to go, this is where I'll be, and this is where I won't. And I don't see a lot of that courage, right? People are in our society, we get more and more insular and more safe and more withdrawn, not just into the phones, but into our neighborhood and behind our fences and into our culture. I mean, this is what we're seeing in the US, right? It's all nationalist and xenophobia. And man, I was reading to my son The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
Mhm.
This is not stuff, right? I mean, it's amazing to think of how people thought about black people 150 years ago.
Right.
They weren't human.
Mm.
So, like, hello, this is it's a danger to start thinking that way. Anyway, I told you I didn't have an answer, so there's my non-answer.
No, that was a good answer and everything, because as you were saying that, I was actually thinking, and sometimes I reflect on situations, whether they're my own situations or family situations. And Deborah may have heard this story before because he's been a guest on some past shows and everything along those lines. But sometimes, even in the boundary conversation and everything, you sometimes have to be willing to challenge the boundaries and all along those lines. And I think that my dad has been a good example of that. He's a visual artist, and he definitely uses his art to address issues. Because he talked about he had a picture of a fire alarm, and it was basically this notion that we give thoughts and prayers to a lot of situations, but we only give thoughts and prayers. So we give lip service. We don't really put action behind it. So he made a art piece about that, and that was his way of tackling a boundary situation and showing it through his artwork and all along those lines. And another example of that I point to something that Dad did was we used to have I work at a cultural arts center when I'm not doing this podcast in the world and everything. And we had a church that met there regularly. And if you go to any certain types of churches, they are known to kind of descend on any new person that comes into the office and everything. So they come to a church service, they're going to descend on them to try to get them to come to the service. So in a way to kind of put them at a disarm them, but also let them know that that wasn't his interest in coming. He was just coming to drop some stuff off to his eldest son, which is namely me and everything. He kind of playfully told them that he didn't know why they were descending on him, because he was basically on the opposite side of that religious dialogue and everything like that. And he's not really that, but he was just using it as a form of disarming so that they would leave him alone, basically, and everything. So I don't know that we do enough of that. Sometimes you've got to disarm the other side and everything. So I just wanted y'all take on that, because I think that that's one of them cases where you can use a boundary challenge to kind of disarm and let not get yourself get caught up in what can be an infringement on your rights.
So, interesting thing I learned about boundaries recently is that boundaries is not just about keeping things out, but they're also about protecting what's within. And so, um, this really helped me to think of boundaries more like fences, where with gates, where you're letting certain things in and out, correct? So, and the really fascinating thing is that people think that by setting boundaries that it's actually going to weaken the relationship, when it's actually going to strengthen the relationship, because then what happens is you improve communication, you have mutual respect, you reduce resentment, and so you're basically teaching others how to treat you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. I know one of the other things you've talked about, Malia, and everything is this notion of the importance of standing out in a competitive industry. And I think we've got two other folks on this show that are definitely in a competitive industry, because you can't get more competitive in my mind than the music and entertainment industry and all along those lines, and even to some degree the therapy industry and everything. So I was just wondering your thoughts on what are some of the ways that someone can leave a lasting impression, even if they are in these competitive industries, whether that's therapy, which is what Lincoln's in, or whether that's the filmmaking world that Deborah's been in for a number of years.
Yeah, so it is definitely my industry. I'm the insurance industry is super competitive. Just in the state of Idaho, where I live in, there's over 100,000 licensed agents, and I compete on a national level, right? And the thing is, we all sell the same exact thing. My competitor down the street is offering the same products as what I'm offering. I don't have any special product that they can't sell. And so it's very important in my industry to stand out. And at first, this was a concept I was really uncomfortable with, because I always thought self-attention seeking was a bad thing. And then I heard someone say this. They said, it's not the best product that wins, it's the best marketed product that wins. And so we're the product, right? So Deborah in the filming industry, she's got to stand out. I love that she's doing the YouTube channel, because that's going to actually help her, set herself apart. People will get to know her. They get to feel like they know, like, and trust her. So I think that's really huge in standing out. Doing videos, like, videos really are intimidating. But from what I've heard from everybody I've talked to that has been successful doing it, they say just do it. Just force yourself to do it, and eventually you're going to feel right at home.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's your take on that, Deborah, and everything?
Well, it's easy for me to stand out because I'm super tall. I'm like 6'1", but that's just physically stand out when I walk into a room. But of course, in the movie industry, it's super competitive. But at the same time, I don't feel that pressure of competition because I'm in my own lane. And if the audience like the art that we put together and put out, and the product that we put out, they're gonna like that regardless who's behind it. So the best way to stand out to an audience is just put out exceptional work, be exceptional. But as far as standing out within the industry, like to back facing to the industry itself, that's always been a challenge, especially for me as a woman in the industry. I've had to carve my way by knowing as much as I can about as much as possible. And I'll give you a real life example. So I didn't used to be taken seriously by some director of photography friends, the people that design the lighting for a set. And one day I showed up to a studio where there were a few of them, and I showed up with some lights that a friend and I had made ourselves. And they were like, "What do you mean you made these lights?" And we're like, "Yeah, we ordered the components and the LED strips and the tubes, and we made these lights." So it all of a sudden they kind of opened up, and they're like, "Tell us more." And they took me seriously because I'd gone a step further than they had on their knowledge base. And it's kind of unfair to have to fight for a seat at the table like that. But you've got a choice. You either do or you don't. And it's because my interest in learning, I love learning, and so because of that, my passion for learning, I've been able to excel in lots of different disciplines within film production. And it's because of that knowledge and because of that passion and because of my willingness to share that with others and being genuine at the end of the day, that has helped supersede any kind of preconceptions or whatever that people have about me. It's like, at the end of the day, what are you putting out? What are you bringing to the team? And how are you interacting with them in a genuine and nice manner? It's nice to be important, but it's really important to be nice. So that's how I stand out, by being genuine, authentic, knowledgeable, and nice.
Hey, Deborah, what made you decide to make a movie about flair bartending, because like I said, and when I had your other guests on, the last time that I remember a movie about bartending, and particularly that type of bartending, was the movie that Tom Cruise was part of, Cocktails. And all along those lines, there hasn't really been one since then, and that was several decades back. So what made you decide that you were going to concentrate on this particular industry in order to highlight some of these people?
Thank you for asking. Well, Shaken and Stirred is the world's first ever feature-length documentary about the underground world of competitive flair bartending. And the reason I got into this was because once upon a time, many lifetimes ago, like 2-3 decades ago, I was a flair bartender, and that's what actually brought me to Las Vegas, my home. And about 3 years ago, I was doing a podcast interview like this with two friends who were still legends in the industry, Rob Husted and Dean Senils. And they were really curious about interviewing me about my past contributions to the world of flair bartending. But they were also kind of curious about this new life that I've had over the last 10 years or 15 years as a film director. And after that interview, I said to them, look, guys, if anyone should ever make a documentary about this, it should be the three of us. And they were really excited about it. And so I then roped in my business partner, Patrick Wertz, who's sitting behind me. And we went out for lunch and I pitched him on the whole thing. And that's what really brought me to the project. But the other second big thing that I have to mention is that one of the hardest things of filmmaking is connecting it to an audience. Mm-hmm. And because of the relationships that we have with Rob and Dean, our business partners, they're still legends in the bartending world, so they had access to that whole world. So we literally had a connection to a grassroots following of bartenders all around the world who are in anticipation of this film, and that was the thing that convinced me. Wow, we've got a grassroots audience here who are eager for this content, and so let's make this movie and serve it up to them.
Sounds like wonders on everything. Hey, Malia, one of the things that I know you talk about in your book and everything, and it seems like there's almost a contradiction in term, because you talk about generosity, and I consider myself to be an empath and to try to be generous when I can and all along those lines. But some people would say that they are almost diametrically opposed. So what do you say to those folks that look at generosity and magnetism and see them as almost being like the opposite sides of the coin and everything like that? Because when I saw some of your background, I'm going like, wait a minute, generosity and magnitude, those are oftentimes seen as like the flip side of each other.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I don't think anyone's ever brought that point up to me, and I see the validity in that. This quote kind of helps me think of gratitude. Gratitude is a currency that we can mint for ourselves and spend without fear of bankruptcy. And that is by Fred DeWitt Van Ambert. He's a publisher and author. And so when I talk about gratitude, I'm not just talking about gratitude as in monetary, but gratitude basically is it's something that if you practice and you develop over time, then people will gravitate towards you. So it actually makes you more generous, and people will be naturally more attracted to you for that reason.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What was you going to say, Deborah, and everything, your take on this notion of generosity? Because I sometimes think that we are not generous enough. And I know that there were, even during the pandemic, efforts for people to show that kindness could win and all along those lines. And there was these various kindness challenges that were taking place both during the pandemic and I would say even some that have taken place after the pandemic. So are we giving kindness enough respect?
It's a great question. I think I think any of the positive virtues, whether it be kindness or generosity or anything positive, falls under the Venn diagram of the light. And I believe the light will always defeat the dark. And honesty and truth and all the good virtues, all the things that, there was a movie, K-Pax, with Kevin Spacey, and he plays an alien, and they said something along the lines to him of, does your species know wrong from right? And he said, every species in the known universe knows the difference between wrong and right. And fundamentally we do, right? And so there's always that inner struggle of, making the right decision on whatever. But I believe in people, and I believe in humanity, and I believe people are good inherently. Okay. And the only reason why people are not virtuous or good is because they're hurt, and hurt people hurt people. But we are inherently a good species. I have to believe that. I believe in humanity, and I believe in positivity, and I believe in the light.
Yeah, just along those same lines, Lincoln, in your matchmaker profile and everything, you have a quote that I said I was going to ask you about and everything, because it's a interesting quote, and I'd love to learn more about what you meant by it, because you said that our personalities float like foam on the deeper ponds of our personality. You don't get real control of your life until you learn to swim below the surface. So what exactly does that mean, and what do you mean by that quote and everything? Because it sounds very powerful and poignant, but maybe folks don't quite get it in the way that I'm interpreting it. But I'd love to hear your interpretation of the quote as it comes from your pen. You're on mute.
Thank you. I guess I'm not that positive about the human race. Sorry to throw cold water on everything.
But, I saw the smirk.
But, it's part of a professional liability. I deal with people's problems, so I hear about a lot of problems. I work to get people above their problems, but then I find that people's problems have the solution that's usually down below the surface. So I don't know if it makes too much sense, but if you can look at the light as all the positive things we can create, and the dark, not as evil, but just confusion, chaos, uncertainty, unresolved, distorted, things like that. I don't find that there's a lot of structure to support the light unless you go down and fix the foundations. I mean, that sounds like I phrased it in a very sort of mechanical framework that makes perfect sense, but we're talking about psychology. So, the old joke is like, I blame it on my mother. But, for God's sake, so many of these problems you can blame on your mother. I mean, yeah, your father does a certain thing too, but so many people have not been mothered. And you say, well, there's never been a manual for how to be a good parent, which there hasn't. And, this is why I have a kind of negative view. It's like humanity is here to prosper, not necessarily you. So prosper means having kids and growing and maybe destroying the earth with your irresponsible guardianship and poor ecological management. But, you have the kids, you raise the kids, and then hopefully they get therapy and don't screw up their kids too much. And it all rolls along. And so where's the light? Well, everybody's sort of reaching for the light and hoping for the light. And everybody's trying to leave behind their mother or whatever their problem is because they don't know how to solve it. Fair enough. Some clients come to me and say, I shouldn't have to pay for this therapy. And I completely agree with them. But, here you go. I guess here's my kind of base thing. In an intact culture, everybody supports everybody else. An intact culture, a family. It's not a nuclear family where everybody's isolated from their neighbors with a fence. It's a family where your relatives are supportive and everybody's on the same side. And we seem to be getting further and further away from that. I mean, you'd think we'd be coming together, but I don't see it. Or maybe it kind of oscillates back and forth. But anyway, everybody should have a therapist, then you shouldn't have to pay for it. But here you go. You don't have $200 an hour? Can't talk to me. So some of my clients says, I found somebody who's cheaper than you. And I say, okay, it's not, I can't afford to charge less because everybody I work with is in my heart and I don't have that many room for too many people in my heart. And it's like, you have to build a family. I'm like rent a family or rent a father or something. And it's expensive. So, I mean, I guess the bottom line, and I don't know how you get to this bottom line, is you have to build a community that supports you. I mean, you talked about that, Maslow's third level on the hierarchy of needs. But how do you build that in this society where we seem to be going in the other direction?
That's a
You
good
know,
question.
you know what we call rent a father in the movie industry?
What?
A manager.
But the interesting thing is I don't manage. I just annoy. Right? I just tell you, I just try to put a fire under your butt. I don't take responsibility, which is slightly different, right? So I'm
Right.
maybe
Well, you're
I'm
not
not
getting 10%, so it's totally different.
I'm rent a backseat driver kind of thing.
Rent a taxi driver, a different kind of attitude and everything like that. Just really quickly, because I know in past shows, Deborah has alluded to some of the, and she's done it a little bit on this show, some of the problematic things that she's gone through in her life and in her career and all along those lines. But how much are we willing to address the issues that we all have? And I don't care who you are, whether you're the most sane or well-balanced person, we've all got issues, whether it's parent issues or whether it's other type of issues, because everybody has some situations that they are coping with in life. We probably all need a therapist in one sense or another, and all along those lines. But how much are we as a society willing to address those, or we try to sweep them under the corner? Because one thing I admire about you, Deborah, is that even some of your past situations that you've been through, including some past relationships, you didn't hide from them. You actually acknowledged them in some past movies that you were in, and all along those lines. But how much do we are afraid to tackle those difficult topics?
Well, call me old-fashioned, but I deal with my problems with drugs and alcohol. But and I'm kidding, of course, not kidding, but I am, right? But I think most people kind of probably fall under that category, right? We all, deal with issues of sweeping it under the rug or self-harm in some way, or, so you're asking the wrong person. We got a therapist in the room, but, I got tissues for issues.
Tissues for issues, but I mean, a lot of people even use
You're shaking your head. I see Lincoln.
Tissues for issues.
Lincoln, I'm gonna hit you up after this. 200 an hour, you got it. We'll get into it because I can see you shaking your head like I'm a nut.
getting into it. Maybe he could solve one of those problems and everything. But I know some people, like you mentioned, drugs and alcohol. And some people also are addicted. I think we talked about it on some past shows, Deborah, to the whole notion of sex and the internet, which is actually what Malia kind of alluded to earlier as well. So it's not just alcohol and drugs, but people also get addicted to other aspects of life as well, and that becomes a problematic part as also. So are we just become so much of an addictive society that we become addicted to everything? Because I mean, even some of the TV shows that I mentioned can be addictive. I'd be lying if I told you that I don't enjoy watching some of those true crime TV series like Criminal Mind and things along those lines and all along that space. But there are a number of those kind of things that can be addictive in nature.
Yeah, they suck you in. That's what their job is. Someone once said that if you wake up in the morning and you have to reach for it, whether it's a substance or your phone, if you have to make sure it's in the same room as you, then you're addicted.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense and everything. Hey, Lincoln, just along those lines, because one of the things that the network has talked about, and I actually had a friend during the pandemic, I got involved with him because he was doing a thing, and he was a George Lucas disciple. Deborah, you'll love to hear this, IPC, and you can see him on YouTube and everything, but he created the Funky Eye Puppets. And one of the things that he talked about, because he got a lot of us to voice actors, and some that were trained as voice actors and some that weren't trained as voice actors, to help him create these characters. And I think he's trying to turn it into a movie and a series and a bunch of other things, maybe even a Broadway play and all along those lines. But this notion that when we admire kids for having childlike wonder and everything, but I sometimes think that as they become adults, we suppress that childlike wonder and everything. So I don't know if Malia's got kids, and I can't remember if Deborah does, or even if you do, Lincoln, and everything. And like I said, I don't have any, but I do have my nephews. Do we repress that childlike wonder that we used to admire so much in our kids when they were kids and all things along those lines? And do we not encourage them to do that? Because I mean, one of the things that we oftentimes hear people talk about is that once you become an adult, it's all about the adulting and all along those lines. So do we repress some of that childlike wonder?
We murder
I
it.
agree.
I think we murder it. I think it's just
Right.
dealt with terribly. But you know, what is creativity? Creativity is disruptive, and we're in a very chaotic time where everybody's trying to get their bearings and their balance. And you know, here's an interesting point. Kids ask like why. That's
Mhm.
the typical kid question. And adults will answer it once or twice, and then they tell them to shut up because the adults don't know why. And you're not supposed to question at some level why. You know, why you should be nice. Why should you do what your parents tell you? Why shouldn't you steal from people? Well, you know, don't ask me more than twice. And I found that in science, when I was doing physics, you couldn't ask the same question more than twice. It comes down to because we said so. That's the way it is. That's, you know, the great minds have told us that, and to question that any further is disruptive. So the question I ask is, in a situation of disequilibrium or change, do you want to be questioning things, or do you want to be towing the line? Or put it another way, should you be questioning things, or should questions be welcome? And I mean, certainly we don't welcome them, especially when they challenge our stability. And as a therapist, this is what I say I do. I challenge people's norms. And if that annoys them, good. And if they take me up on it, well, that's good too. So, and I should also mention, I don't like the attitude of compulsory education or any of this idea where people are supposed to tell you. I mean, this fits in your whole question here. I'm totally on the page of play and creativity and invention, to the point where it can be destructive because you do need to destroy things in order to create new things. There's only so much room for stuff. So you have to be somewhat tolerant or even invite. One of the things I love to do as a kid is to blow things up. You know, how far do you take this? Because you could take it to some pretty sadistic levels, of which I did, and I'm sure we all have. So where's the boundary again between being creative and being supportive? I don't know. I mean, that's my job as a therapist, not to know. People think I know. No, I don't know. I know less than you, and that's why I'm in business, because I can tell you how little you know as well. So, yes, creativity is great. In my view, it's the paradigm. But, you know, that's people pay me to say bullshit, and that's what I do.
That makes a lot of sense and everything. Hey, Malia, along those same lines and everything, I'm here in Durham, North Carolina. I alluded to that earlier and everything along those lines. And there are certain industries that were at the forefront, and you talked about how it is in the where you live and everything. But the insurance business really was one of the key businesses for what was labeled Black Wall Street. It was the insurance industry. It was the uh, industries because North Carolina Mutual and Mechanics and Farmers Bank. So it was both insurance and banking, as well as, of course, some of them more traditional minority businesses like funeral homes and medicine and things like that. So I just wondered how much of the power do you think that we understand about the insurance business in general and everything? Because, like I said, whether it was Central Park, because yes, Central Park in New York was a Black Wall Street, or Rose,
Mhm.
or Tulsa, Oklahoma, a lot of them were run by insurance and financial mavericks. And now some of these mavericks also learned at defeat of some of the uh, robber barons of the day, because one of the founders of, I think, one of those institutions was Mr. Merrick, and Mr. Merrick was also the barber of Mr. Duke. So he was cutting his hair and learning from him, getting a Fuquay education without going to Fuquay school and everything. So I just wondering, do you think that we as a society understand the importance of insurance and the importance of generational wealth?
Yeah, I think that it's such a convoluted industry. And I think that's why a lot of individuals need help from experts because there's so much to know. There's so much to know, and there's so many things happening in the insurance world right now. And there's a lot of uncertainty. So lots of changes happening, and some good, some bad, but a lot of people view insurance companies as like the bad guy. Like, why am I paying this much amount of money, and then there's a hopefully I don't use it, hopefully I don't have to use it. And so it's a really tough one because I think without insurance, if something devastating were to happen to your home or your health, then it could be financially devastating.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Deborah, along those same lines, and I'd be lying if I said that I am totally prepared. And I know that my parents are about to be, well, mom is 82, about to be 83 in May. And that makes dad about to be getting ready to near 85. And a lot of times we don't like to deal with the fact that we have aging parents and what could be coming, because just like we're born, we're all going to eventually die and all along those lines. So how much do we as a society, particularly the creative class, try to avoid those hard topics and everything like that? Because I'm thinking that you even had to be putting some things in place for your own legacy should you be leaving anytime soon. And we're not trying to wish that on you. We want you to be around till the 2080, 2090, or however long we can keep you here on the planet and everything. But how important do you think it is in terms of us addressing the inevitable?
Oh wow. I think it's just a very, very human thing to just not think about it and put it off and just, and quite naturally so, because if you're an atheist, then the moment you die, you will never know. Right?
Mm.
So if and that's the paradigm that I subscribe to. I'm personally an atheist. I'm spiritual, which I know is a contradiction, but we're all contradictions. I can see Lincoln already squinting and making faces. But so I'm an atheist. So the moment I die, I won't know. So unless that DMT trip, unless everything that happened in that DM trip is true, and then I'm going off into another universe and there's weird beings, and who knows what's on the other side. I guarantee you this. Whatever is on the other side, it's not what any of us think, if there is an other side. But it's just also mind-blowing and like, it's too big for our little human brains to comprehend, or at least mine. So I just, I don't think about legacy or the inevitable or the afterlife. If I'm supposed to know at that point, I will know. But if I'm not supposed to know at that point, then be it. So let me just concentrate on the life that I have, and the living, and the here and the now. That's my take on it.
Yeah. What's your take, Mother, and everything? Because I actually think that we are multiple beings, and I do believe that, even though I'm not a good practitioner of what I'm going to say and everything, but I do think that a lot of us need to try to have good physical health, good mental health, I would argue good emotional health, and to some degree, whether you're an atheist or not, good spiritual health, because I do believe in spirituality more than I believe in religion, because I'm not a big fan of organized religion and all along those lines, but I do believe in the spiritual journey and all in that kind of space. But I was just wondering, do you think that we, because I had DoorDash earlier, that was not healthy living and everything like that. So I know that I'm not always doing the things that I should be doing. The last time I did some exercising, it's been so long ago that I can't even tell y'all, because it's been that long ago. So I know that I need to do better with my physical health as well and everything. But sometimes we ignore those things and everything. But I guess I'll start with you, Lincoln. How important do you think it is to have that quote unquote balanced lifestyle?
I love to listen to you. You go all over the place. You're like a cat on a leash.
This is one of the more interesting interviews that I've ever done, because it's always the same old questions, and this is great, guys.
Well,
I love hearing your input, and Mark, great job.
I don't know what question you asked, Mark, but I had an answer in my mind, so I'll tell you what it was. I just wrote a piece on dying satisfied. It seemed to be sounds relevant. And my conclusion in this piece was that the only people I know who died satisfied, they lived satisfied. And most of the people I know who are great minds, like Leonardo da Vinci and a number of physicists, they did not die satisfied. They said they were quite unsatisfied. And I concluded that, if you want things to be good at the end, then they have to be good all along. It's a step-by-step thing. You'll be as happy when you die as you are right now, unfortunately or fortunately. And I don't know, maybe that sounds sort of spiritual, sort of, but it's also pragmatic.
Yeah.
It flies in the face of my own reality. Like, am I satisfied? Well, if I was, why would I be trying, pedaling so hard? So here's what I'd say. You have to like what you got.
Right.
So if you're a high octane person who's always got to be performing or producing, but you got to like that. I mean, yeah, you can, it's like you say, there were many people. Oh yeah, there's part of us that's not as satisfied, and there's part of us that's bitter, and there's part of us that's spirit. Okay, but it's like when I deal with schizophrenics. I dealt with this one schizophrenic, and I said, okay, let's everybody just go to the beach. All of your people, let's just go to the beach and just put the weapons down and just have a good time. And they actually did. And then their caretaker took them away because they said then they were not properly schizophrenic like they should be, but which is a deep statement on psychotherapy. But that's my conclusion, is that you have to throw out a lot of this philosophy and just get down to the moment. If you're not running, if your carburetor is not well tuned now, it's not a question of make it another few laps. You got to deal with it right now. This is it.
This is it. This is it. We're all doing like the first time.
Well, I do believe there is a spiritual realm, and I know that people feel it. I mean, I think there's a rise in people trying to seek out in different ways. But the way I thought about it is, if indeed there is a creator, right, that created us, it's either yes or no. Like either someone created us or not, right? If it is true, then it would be a really good idea for us to seek that creator out. And so I definitely encourage people to do their research and seek that answer out.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense and everything.
You just reminded me of why I am a director, because the position of God was already taken.
So that job was already taken, so you could have that job. As you were thinking that, Lincoln, I was actually thinking, because for years my parents created a radio station in the mid 70s. It was like from 76 until about 88, because they were frustrated. It's part of the reason that I was attracted to Pod TV, because they were frustrated by the media landscape of this particular era. But that's why my parents created the more traditional radio station that was on and everything. But there was a blues song that was being played regularly during that time, and it was this notion of they hadn't seen a armored car at a funeral home yet. And I don't remember the blues artist that sang that song, but that notion is very real and all along those lines, because basically they're saying that unlike maybe the Egyptians that tried to carry it with them, nobody recently has been trying to carry it with them, and all along those lines. So you can attain all this wealth, but is it going with you wherever there is, and all along those lines? So that was something that I loved playing that song on a regular basis, because I couldn't think of any well-to-do people that had had that armored car at the funeral. They might have had the hearse and everything else, but you never saw the armored car there at the funeral, because you're not going to take the money with you. So there's no need for the armored car to be there. So I did like that lyric and everything. And Lincoln, you'll get a kick out of this also and everything. But I have written certain short stories and certain like play kind of things and everything. And one of them is literally what you just said, but it was in the Reagan era, not the Trump era. So I had a character that I wrote that basically was in their therapist's office. And while they were in their therapist's office, they were pointing out all the insane things that were going on in the world. Because I wrote this when I was in college in the 80s and everything. So they were pointing out pollution. They were pointing out all the injustices, kind of like the race stuff that you were saying and everything like that and everything. And the punchline at the end of the short story was the therapist was asking the patient, who is the real insane people and everything. And the person that was the schizophrenic character was basically like, well, y'all say that I'm the crazy one, but when I look at the people in the politics and everything, they look like they're really the crazy ones, and all along those lines. And then I had them going off and having a conversation with their friends, Napoleon, I think it was Mahatma Gandhi, and a number of other folks that were in their space with them in the schizophrenic wing and everything like that. But the gist of the short story, or this particular satire, was who is really insane, those of us that we claim are sane, or those that are the ones that are supposed to be the sane ones.
It's an old story. That's right.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I brought it and created my own version of it and everything, and I enjoyed it, and all along those lines. But it was a fun one, and maybe we'll turn it into a movie. Maybe Deborah could turn it into a.
You remember the movie King of Hearts? That was one of them.
Yeah, that was one.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I can't speak for you crazy cats, but I'm perfectly sane.
Yeah. I'll see you on Thursday.
Excellent. 9 a.m. please. Earlier if you got it. I need it.
So you'll see her on Thursday, you're going to see Malaya on Friday, and you're going to see me on Wednesday. Is that the idea
That's right.
now?
We'll fit you all in. That's right.
Excellent. Maybe group therapy. Maybe this is the group therapy.
It totally is.
That's totally what the online dinner party is, because I invite different people on and we learn from each other. That's kind of what I always think of this as and everything. And we're going to wrap up shortly. I certainly enjoyed this conversation and everything along those lines. But I do have a things I do with all of these shows, and they, like I said, usually run an hour and a half to 2 hours and everything. So I'll start with you, Malia. If there's anything that you haven't got to that you would like to get to in terms of the conversation, and any things that you want to tell about the book. We kind of alluded to it, Magnetic Allure and everything, and how people can get that book and everything. And also, I guess I'll just ask you as a precursor to that, how important is referrals? Because I know a lot of people talk about referrals, and your book even deals with that. But sometimes I think people don't even know how to get a successful referral and everything. And I am guilty of having thousands of business cards, and I don't know that I always do a good job of following up with those business cards and everything. So how important is it for us to have a referral system?
Yeah, so I think that referrals is the reason why my business, catapulted to serving thousands of people nationwide. Because here's the deal. If you have a service or a product to offer people, then cold calling, door knocking, chasing leads is just not fun. So the whole thing with the idea of referrals is that it's other professionals that have the target audience that is your target market, and it's other professionals sending people your way. And so it's 92% of consumers will trust referrals from people that they know, and you're 4 times more likely to do business with someone who was referred to you. And so that's super important. And I do believe that all it takes is one person to blow up your business. So if you're just starting out your business and you're looking, you're struggling with finding ways to earn business, I would say definitely focus on building referral partners.
That makes a lot of sense. Everything. Tell folks again how they can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about the book and everything. And one thing that I do with all of these shows is I let people give their message of positivity, because it is a global network, Pod TV. So I try to get everybody to give a message of positivity. So if you want to share your message of positivity to our global audience.
Yeah, my message is that anyone can be magnetic. So you think about materials that are magnetic, they draw objects to you, and people can be magnetic as well. And so in my book, I talk about 9 characteristics that make people magnetic, and they're all characteristics that can be developed and built over time. And you can find information on my book. I also have a free workbook that you could download on maliarogers.com. My book's on sale for $12.99 on Amazon. There's also a Kindle version and an Audible version as well.
Just really quickly before I get to Deborah, what are some of those 9 traits that are of the magnetic person? And hopefully they'll go get the book and learn more about them in detail. But what are those 9 traits?
The 9 characteristics are: magnetic people are interesting. They have a tribe. They have a magnetic signature voice. They know how to unveil hidden gems in others. They radiate appreciation. They serve others. They know how to connect, like they know how to match make. They're also they also have a captivating presence online. They're charismatic and they're courageous.
Well, we look forward to hearing people learn more about how they can develop those traits and all along those lines. Deborah, is it too late for me at 62, one, to still be a parent? We were alluding to that earlier and everything, and I think that I've given up on that dream and everything. And is it also too late for me to become a flair bartender, or can I become a flair bartender at 62, about to be 63 in July?
Oh my gosh! I think anyone can become a flair bartender at any age if someone's gonna give you a bottle to throw around and a job to serve people. I wouldn't recommend picking up bottles and throwing them at age 60 plus because it's a dangerous, it's an extreme sport, right? But there's no reason why you couldn't if you truly wanted to. But I'd like to give out a positive message. You were saying about positive messages. Yeah, so I just want to let everyone know that if you watch Shaken and Stirred, you will become more intelligent, you will make more money, you'll become more attractive to the opposite sex, and you will feel happy deep within you. So you can save 10% off right now and pre-order it at flairdocumentary.com. And it doesn't get more positive than that.
No, it doesn't get more positive than that whatsoever. So please go get there and get all of that. They will come and find out that they have gotten all those wishes that they want. If they wanted to get with Halle Berry, if they wanted to get with Tom Cruise, apparently if you watch this documentary, you can now do that in your life and everything. So apparently that's what's going to happen by watching that documentary. Whatever those wishes are, you can have them happen for you just by watching the documentary, if I'm hearing Deborah correctly.
I feel like Lincoln's going to charge me even more now.
No, just regular family rate.
Oh, great.
Just the regular family rate and everything. Lincoln, what is your thoughts about how folks can get in touch with you and all along those lines? I'm still, because I had some friends that did skydiving. I used to say that I would try to do mountaineering because I did see that was something that you've done in the past and everything, but that's a lot of height. So I don't know that I'm going to actually try
You
the
do
mountaineering.
skydiving. You can do skydiving. You're not too old for that. I'd suggest that.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Something about the falling out of a plane.
That's all right. You get strapped to somebody else. They do the jumping. You just do the screaming. That's all.
Oh, is that what it is? Sorry.
Yeah,
Just do
screaming.
screaming?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I did it once. It was great. I never thought it could be the same, so I only did it once. But since everybody's doing endorsements, okay, so here's my thing. I think everybody has to attend to their neurology and their emotions and their mind. You have to learn, you have to feel, and you have to be aware that you have these habits, and I call them neurology, but you could call them whatever you want. So my latest book is called Operating Manual for Enlightenment. I try to talk about these three parts of your body. Taking care of yourself. And usually we're sort of a little slow on one of the three parts. So I do encourage people to be courageous. I think courage is one of the elements we don't talk about enough. Of course, it's self-courage, right? To face difficult stuff, like you mentioned my quote about going under the surface.
Well,
and talking about your parents. You never end talking about your parents. But I also have to finish with, I have to get even with Deborah because she told a joke and I didn't. So now I have to tell one. Another thing that I will get to it, is that dreams are big with me right now. It's a topic I'm spending a lot of time on. And I want to encourage everybody to dream. And in fact, I want everyone to close their eyes so I can give them this post-hypnotic suggestion. Close your eyes. You will remember your dream tonight. You will remember your dream tonight. Well, it's the most important thing, is to want to do it. And why your dreams are important is because they're the place in the world where you can make all your mistakes. That's where you can act like an idiot, kill people, love people, go flying, and make a total jerk of yourself. And it's important to do that, because otherwise, how would you know what the right road was if you didn't try the wrong one? So here's the joke. And this is a real dream, not mine, but someone else's. I am being chased by a gorilla. He is very large and menacing. I run away. Finally, I realize I must face him or keep running away. As I stop and face him, he turns into a man who tells me, "You must be more specific when talking about your feelings."
Can I just quickly say about dreams, right? So I once called up my manager and he said, "Debbie, I have to tell you about my dream." And I'm like, "Well, what? And he's like, the dream was you and I were sitting in this office at this big agency in Hollywood, and I could hear your last film playing in the background. And I said, so I'm paying you 10% for you to tell me your dreams instead of realizing mine. And that's why he's my ex-manager.
Yeah, he's your ex-manager. He's not your current manager. You got rid of him and everything.
Because I don't pay him to tell me his dreams. I want him to like make mine become reality. So
Yeah, that
Good.
makes a lot of sense. Hey, Lincoln, just really quickly before we get ready to play the commercial to get us on out of here and everything, how much do you think that we are too attached, because you kind of alluded to it earlier, to the visions of those that are ahead of us and everything? Because I know that I come from a highly successful family, and sometimes both me and my brother are encouraged by that, but it can also be something that can be difficult to live up to, because my grandmother was the first African American library. Well, she created the first African American library in our state capital, and my parents have done a number of things, including that radio station that I talked about and everything like that. So I do know that sometimes it can be a burden, but it can also be something that you can be proud of as well. But I just wondering your take on that, because I'm thinking that some of your clients may have been similar to Deborah, from well-to-do. They might have had some past successes from their ancestors that they're trying to live up to.
Well, I think you have to realize they've got to live two lives. You can live at least two lives. You can live a life in which you're successful, and that sort of fits Malia's story of being charismatic and having a lot of clients and respect in business. But if you actually want to do unusual things that change the world, they're going to nail you to a cross if you're unlucky. And you'll probably be lucky if you get away without any bruises. But anybody who's got some really big ideas is going to be got a big target on their back. And so, I mean, that's really important. If you really want to be creative, you have to give yourself the space to be a failure, because everybody's going to tell you you are. And that's got to be okay. And if that's your only life, then you're going to be unhappy. So it's got to be your other life. I mean, not everybody's going to be Pablo Picasso. In fact, nobody is going to be, because he's gone. So, you know, the message is, yeah, you got to take care of yourself and other people and your responsibilities, and be grateful and be gracious and all that stuff. But if you want to be creative and make a difference and really see God, in my opinion, you've got to be able to go to hell.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Figure that out. I don't know.
Yeah.
1000%. I've got complete as an artist. You know, I've been a full-time writer director for 15 years, and as a professional artist, it is hell. It is, because you're basically setting yourself up for failure and to be a target and to be a punching bag. And you know, not all your ideas are going to be great, but you still have to explore them. You still have to try, and so it's a very strange place being an artist. But it's definitely.
But that's what Mark said. What do we do with kids who want to be creative, and are we supporting our own creativity? And you know, these are the answers to that question. It's dangerous to be creative. Maybe you shouldn't support your kids to be too creative.
It's really dangerous and everything along those lines. But the other issues that happened, and I know it's happened in my life, I think it's happened in yours, Deborah, because you've been on past shows and everything. But there's a number of what a friend of mine calls those dream stealers and everything like that. So I don't know how you have dealt with that, because I'm sure there were people even on this movie that were telling you all the reasons that you shouldn't make a movie about the Flair documentary world, just like I'm sure there were people that were telling Malia that she shouldn't be as successful as she is in the insurance space, and even you, Lincoln, in the therapist space, because I do know that there's a number of those dream stealers out there and everything like that, and a lot of people that like to get the rewards of the pay. You were earlier alluded to that, Lincoln, because I've got some friends that are always complaining that they don't like it when people want to get their consulting, but they don't want to pay for the consulting. A friend of mine, Ray Pasco, calls it the brain drain, which is very common in the creative world and everything like that, where they will drain your brain but not pay you the rewards and everything like that. So how do you deal with that, Deborah?
Well, I think there's three kinds of people in the world: those who, watch things happen, those who make things happen, and those who wonder what happened. And I remember even as a teenager, I'd have friends that would say, oh, I'm going to start a t-shirt company and we're going to do this and I'm going to do that. And they constantly talk about it and never do it. So, energy vampires or dream stealers, as you call them, they're not even in my vision. I'm in my own lane. I'm doing my own thing. I heard someone say the other day that you shouldn't listen to, unless you're going to a teacher or a professional, you shouldn't really listen to advice unless that person has a financial interest in your success. So a lot of people will give me their opinion and stuff. And around here we have three kinds of notes, right? Notes that I agree with, notes that I don't agree with, and notes that so many people have said the same thing that I'm left with no choice but to agree with. And everything else can, just go out the window because you got to plot a course and go for it, and you can't let people in the periphery drag you down with their nonsense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. I want to go out with Can Do Spice, but I'll start with Malia. But if everybody got any last minute thoughts that they want to share before I play Can Do Spice and get us on out of here, this has been a great conversation. I look forward to having all of you back on some future editions of this show or some other shows. Because as Deborah knows, I will definitely invite you back. I think this is back her third time being on one of these shows and all along those lines. But always good to have these great conversations. So Malia and Lincoln, y'all are definitely invited back as well. So Malia, any final thoughts before I get ready to play this Can Do Spice, which is a woman that actually did a natural supplement dedicated to her father and all along those lines. So any last minute thoughts, Malia?
I just want to say I really enjoyed this conversation and I learned a lot from all of you. So I'm grateful for this time and I appreciate you inviting me onto your show.
Glad to do it. Hopefully we'll see you back in the near future. Deborah, any last minute thoughts that you want to share before I get to Lincoln?
Likewise, I just want to echo that sentiment. Thank you, Mark, for holding space for us. And this has been a really lovely conversation and a deep dive into our psyches. And I'm now going to cry in a fetal position at the base of my shower.
All right. And then you can call Lincoln afterwards. Lincoln, any last minute thoughts? And then I'll play this spot from Can Do Spices.
Well, I don't know. You put me on the spot. I guess say I think it's everybody's obligation to change the world. I think it's your obligation. If we're all Jesus Christ, then that's where we look forward to, and I think we can do it. So don't shirk. Be courageous.
Can I just add something really quick to that? Like my sister and I were talking the other day, and we were talking about all the problems in the world and all the stuff that's aggravating us. And she said to me, "Why are we talking about this if we're like little ants on the back of the dog? Why if we can't change the world, why are we talking about this?" And I said to her, "We're talking about this so the world doesn't change us."
Very good.
Yeah, powerful statement. On that note, we're going to go out with Can Do Spices and maybe one about a organization that is helping women that have been through abuse and everything, that being Natasha House and all along those lines. That's in Virginia. But we're going to get on out of here, and I've thoroughly enjoyed having all of y'all, and I will see y'all back on another online dinner party in the not too distant future. But great conversation, and I look forward to seeing all of you back on future shows, as well as being at another edition of the online dinner party on next Wednesday, which will be the 26th. But right now, we're going to get on out of here and have these particular commercials. So we'll catch you later on.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements, but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends, so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can-Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can-Do Spice a try.
It is a gem, tucked away near a forest, a place where the lost are found. It is a gift of wholeness for those who are ready to receive it. A secret place where peace can be found in stillness, where you can finally stop fighting to survive and just breathe. Just breathe. Where accountability corrects and the word help is not a cuss word. It is the place that was thought of before you ever thought you needed it. It is where forgiveness starts and healing begins. Where we are taught that when we put our hands to work, we can create something. As we uprooted the weeds in the garden, it was a reflection of our lives. As we uprooted disappointment, as we uprooted pain, as we uprooted being traumatized. Because God doesn't deal with the surface. He gets to the root of it. We laughed. We shared tears. We shared our stories. We shared our fears, our dreams, our visions, our heart. We were more than just mothers. We were broken women trying to figure out how to become whole again. It became a place where homelessness became hopeless until we reached the bridge of wholeness.
If you're talking, they will hear you.
We all want our kids to grow up safe and healthy, so we show them how. And we tell them with honest conversations that let them know what we expect. Not just one time, but every chance we get. That's especially important when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. Kids not only need to know the dangers and how to avoid them, they need to hear it often from you. And when it comes to pain medications, opioids, they need to know that they should never be taken without a prescription and never shared with friends or family. It's dangerous and illegal. So talk with your kids and guide them through the challenges of growing up safe and healthy. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
So